Welcome back, Wastelanders. Today we're diving into one of the darkest revelations in Fallout lore, the truth about who really started the Great War. This isn't just another conspiracy theory from the Wasteland. This is documented evidence from someone who was actually there when it was planned. The lore begins now. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I'm telling you this story because I was there. I heard it with my own ears. I listened through a surveillance device hidden in my wife's Pip-Boy as she sat in a conference room at Vault-Tec headquarters and calmly proposed that their corporation should drop the first nuclear bombs on America, guaranteeing the apocalypse they'd been selling protection from. And every single executive in that room nodded in agreement like she'd just suggested a reasonable quarterly sales strategy. Let me back up. In 2077, I was still Cooper Howard, the movie star, the friendly cowboy from all those westerns you probably never saw, the happy father with the perfect Hollywood family, the smiling face of Vault-Tec's advertising campaigns. I was the original Vault Boy, the cheerful mascot giving America a thumbs up while my wife's company planned the end of civilization. I didn't know it yet, but I was selling genocide with a smile. It started when I met a woman named Moldaver at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. She was a scientist working on cold fusion technology, clean, unlimited energy that could have saved the world from the resource wars tearing nations apart. But Vault-Tec had bought up every cold fusion research company in America and buried the technology deep where it would never see light. Moldaver told me my wife Barb was involved in something terrible, something that went beyond corporate greed into territory I couldn't imagine. She warned me that Vault-Tec wasn't building shelters to save people. They were building laboratories to experiment on them. I didn't believe her at first. Barb was ambitious. Sure, she worked late hours climbing the corporate ladder at Vault-Tec, and she'd convinced me to become their spokesman when my acting career started fading. But planning apocalypse? Conducting experiments on American citizens? That seemed like communist paranoia, the kind of conspiracy theory that got writers blacklisted in Hollywood. I'd fought for my country in Alaska wearing that T-45 power armor. Nearly died defending America from the Chinese. My wife couldn't be part of something that evil. But Moldaver planted doubt in my mind like a seed in poisoned soil. She gave me a listening device, small enough to hide in Barb's Pip-Boy without her noticing. I told myself I was just proving Moldaver wrong, that I'd hear boring corporate meetings about vault door specifications and quarterly earnings reports. Instead, I heard my wife orchestrating the murder of billions. The meeting took place on a Tuesday afternoon in September 2077. Remember, because it was Janie's birthday the week before, and Barb had missed the party for a critical business engagement. I sat in my car outside Vault-Tec's Los Angeles headquarters, listening through a wireless receiver as Barb walked into a secure conference room. The device transmitted every word clearly, too clearly. Bud Askins opened the meeting. He was Vault-Tec's senior junior vice president, a weasel of a man I'd met at corporate parties. He'd worked at West-Tec before joining Vault-Tec, oversaw the rollout of that T-45 armor that killed so many of my Marine brothers because of design flaws he ignored. He greeted each executive by name as they entered. Robert House from Robco Industries, the genius billionaire who owned half of Nevada. Leon von Felden from West-Tec, the scientist developing something called the Forced Evolutionary Virus. Julia Masters from Repcon Aerospace, the rocket company. Frederick Sinclair, representing Big Mountain. Big Ment, that mysterious think tank in the Mojave. These were the most powerful corporate leaders in America, gathered in one room. Bud started his presentation about Project Safe House, Vault-Tec's plan to build 122 underground vaults across the nation. He explained that 17 would be control vaults, actual shelters designed to save people. The other 105 would be experimental facilities conducting what he called the greatest social experiments in human history. Each corporation would receive several vaults to conduct their own research without government oversight, without ethics committees, without any restrictions except their imagination. Vault-Tec wanted vaults to test the forced evolutionary virus on human subjects, creating super mutant soldiers without military interference. Big Emat requested vaults for psychological conditioning experiments, testing how long isolated populations could maintain sanity under various forms of mental torture. Repcon needed vaults to develop space colonization technology using humans as test subjects for radiation exposure and cryogenic suspension. Frederick Sinclair took vaults for his Sierra Madre project, building self-sustaining environments with advanced security systems that would later become his tomb. Each company described their plans with clinical detachment, discussing human beings like laboratory equipment. Then, Robert House asked the question that changed everything. His voice came through the speaker cold and calculating. How can you guarantee results based on a hypothetical scenario? Peace talks between America and China are progressing. The Anchorage front is stabilizing. What if nuclear war never comes? Your entire business model collapses. The room went silent. I held my breath in my car, waiting for Barb to defend their plans, to explain some contingency strategy. Instead, I heard my wife speak 3 words that destroyed my faith in humanity. By dropping the bomb ourselves. She said it without hesitation, without emotion, like she'd rehearsed this answer 1,000 times. Her voice was steady and confident, the same voice she used when reading bedtime stories to Janie. We need to guarantee the apocalypse happens, Barb continued. Peace would be catastrophic for Vault-Tec's profitability. We've invested billions in vault construction. Our shareholders demand returns. If the bombs never fall, we face bankruptcy and criminal investigations into our experimental programs. I wanted to rip the listening device out and pretend I never heard it. I wanted to believe this was some twisted role-playing exercise, corporate leaders exploring worst-case scenarios. But the other executives started asking practical questions. How many bombs would be needed? Which cities should be targeted first? How would they coordinate with China to make it look like foreign aggression? They discussed mass murder with the same casual professionalism I'd seen in Hollywood pitch meetings. Barb explained her vision. When Vault-Tec is the only entity left standing after nuclear devastation, there will be no competition, no regulation, no government interference. We'll have a true monopoly on human survival. We control which humans live, which societies form, which ideologies persist into the new world. This is our opportunity to wipe the slate clean and rebuild civilization according to our specifications. Leon von Felden from Vault-Tec suggested they needed vaults in strategic locations to test how different populations responded to FEV exposure. Julia Masters from Repcon proposed a vault governed entirely by artificial intelligence to see if robots could manage human populations more efficiently than human overseers. Frederick Sinclair wanted a vault so overcrowded that residents would have to compete violently for resources, testing social Darwinism in controlled conditions. Robert House, always the pragmatist, argued they should preserve Las Vegas using an upgraded defense grid he was developing, creating a corporate paradise that would outlast the apocalypse. Bud Askins presented his own contingency plan called Bud's Buds. He explained that Vault-Tec executives would be frozen in cryogenic suspension in a special vault, Vault 31, designed to preserve the company's leadership for centuries. These frozen executives would be awakened periodically to serve as overseers for breeding vaults, controlling populations through time itself. They would outlive their competitors, outlast governments, outlive entire civilizations if necessary. The greatest weapon we possess, Bud said with disturbing enthusiasm, is time. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I'd been married to this woman for 12 years. We had a daughter together, a beautiful little girl who trusted her mother completely. And Barb had been planning genocide the whole time, working late not on safety features but on strategies for orchestrated extinction. Every kiss goodnight was a lie. Every I love you was contamination from poisoned lips. If you're still with me after hearing this, hit that like and subscribe button. The meeting continued for another hour, but I'd already heard enough to understand the full scope of their conspiracy. They weren't just planning to drop bombs, they were engineering the perfect conditions to ensure their experiments would succeed without interference. Vault-Tec had been manipulating the Sino-American War for years, keeping tensions high enough to justify vault sales but never letting it escalate to actual nuclear exchange. They'd lobbied Congress to increase defense spending while simultaneously suppressing clean energy research that might have prevented resource scarcity. Every food riot, every energy crisis, every international incident had been carefully cultivated to create demand for their vaults. Barb explained that pre-war society was collapsing anyway. Resource depletion had made petroleum worth more than gold. The new plague was killing millions despite West Tech's attempts to develop a pan-immunity virus. Social unrest was tearing cities apart from the inside. Nuclear war isn't creating apocalypse, she argued. It's accelerating an inevitable collapse and giving us control over what emerges from the ashes. We're not destroying the world, we're saving it from itself. The executives discussed timing. Robert House mentioned he needed until October 24th to complete his defense upgrades for New Vegas. He'd developed something called the Platinum Chip, a data storage device that would upgrade his Securitron army to protect the Las Vegas Strip from nuclear devastation. He was 20 hours short of being ready, he admitted, but that was an acceptable risk. Leon von Felden said West Tech needed until January 2078 to complete their FFEV research at Mariposa Military Base, but Barb overruled him. "We can't wait that long," she said. "Peace talks are progressing too quickly. We strike in October or risk losing our window entirely." I sat in that car listening to my wife schedule Armageddon like a product launch. She discussed optimal detonation altitudes for maximum casualties. She debated whether to target military installations or population centers first. She calculated acceptable levels of global radiation that would make the surface uninhabitable for exactly the right amount of time, long enough to complete their vault experiments, but not so long that the planet became permanently sterile. The most horrifying part wasn't the casual cruelty, it was the enthusiasm. These executives were excited. They saw nuclear holocaust as the ultimate business opportunity, a chance to reshape humanity without democratic resistance or ethical oversight. Barb described it as humanity's graduation day, the moment when corporate vision would finally be freed from government inefficiency and public sentiment. They would build a new world populated entirely by people raised in their experimental vaults, molded from birth to accept corporate authority as natural and inevitable. Frederick Sinclair proposed a vault where residents would be exposed to psychotropic drugs pumped through the air supply, testing how chemical dependency could ensure long-term population control. Julia Masters suggested a vault governed by a robot overseer with no human oversight whatsoever, proving that artificial intelligence could manage humans more efficiently than democratic systems. Leon von Felden wanted a vault where children would be evaluated at age 16, with only the most intelligent allowed to reach adulthood, creating a genetically superior management class through forced eugenics. Robert House listened to these proposals with cold calculation. He wasn't interested in experiments. He wanted results. "May the best idea win," he said finally. "Whoever develops the most effective post-war governance model deserves to inherit what's left of civilization. Competition will determine which corporation has the superior vision." The others agreed. They would divide America's vaults among themselves like territory, each company pursuing their own vision of humanity's future, and whichever experiment succeeded best would determine the shape of the new world. I realized then that every faction in the modern wasteland exists because these corporations designed them. The Brotherhood of Steel would emerge from West Tech's military facilities when soldiers discovered the FEV experiments and rebelled. The super mutants would be von Felden's failed attempt to create obedient soldiers. The Institute would grow from Big Mom meets technological research. Even the new California Republic would form from vault populations specifically engineered to value democratic principles, part of a long-term control group to compare against authoritarian alternatives. Nothing in the wasteland would be random. Everything would be designed, tested, measured against corporate objectives. Barb revealed one more detail that made me want to vomit. She explained that Vault-Tec executives like herself would be preserved in Vault 31's cryogenic chambers, but their families would be placed in separate facilities. Emotional attachments compromise decision-making, she said. We need our leadership focused on Vault-Tec's mission without personal distractions. Family members will be safe in designated control vaults, reunited with executives once the surface stabilizes in approximately 200 years. I understood immediately what this meant. Barb was planning to abandon Janie and me. She would freeze herself in a corporate vault while our daughter and I faced nuclear annihilation on the surface or got trapped in some experimental facility designed to torture us psychologically for Vault-Tec's research purposes. She'd already calculated our deaths into her business model, weighed our lives against quarterly projections, and found us expendable. The meeting concluded with handshakes and champagne toasts. I heard glasses clinking through my receiver as corporate leaders celebrated their agreement to murder civilization. Barb laughed at something Robert House said, that warm, genuine laugh I'd fallen in love with 15 years ago. The same woman who tucked Janie into bed every night was toasting the planned extinction of billions. The cognitive dissonance shattered something fundamental in my mind. I drove home in a daze, the listening device still transmitting in my pocket. Barb arrived 3 hours later, cheerful and affectionate, asking about my day like nothing had happened. She kissed me hello. She asked if I'd picked up Janie from her piano lesson. She complained about traffic on the freeway. She was the perfect wife, the loving mother, the accomplished executive balancing career and family, and she was a monster wearing my wife's face. I couldn't confront her directly. What would I say? I spied on your corporate meeting and discovered you're planning nuclear genocide? She'd deny everything, claim I misunderstood, maybe even have me committed to a psychiatric facility. Vault-Tec had enough power to disappear people who knew too much. Moldaver's resistance group was already being labeled communist terrorists by government officials on Vault-Tec's payroll. If I spoke publicly, I'd be discredited as a washed-up actor spreading conspiracy theories to regain relevance. So, I started divorce proceedings quietly. I told Barb our marriage wasn't working, that I needed space, that Hollywood pressures were affecting our relationship. She seemed relieved, actually, like she'd been waiting for me to pull the trigger. We agreed to share custody of Janie, alternating weeks. Barb kept the house. I moved into a small apartment in Burbank, barely able to afford rent after Vault-Tec stopped hiring me for commercials. They replaced my face with an illustrated cartoon version, the cheerful Vault Boy giving thumbs up in advertisements while I descended into obscurity. My acting career died completely after I left Vault-Tec. Directors wouldn't hire me. Producers wouldn't return my calls. I realized Barb's company had blacklisted me across the entire entertainment industry. They controlled too much advertising revenue for studios to risk offending them. I went from starring in feature films to performing at children's birthday parties, dressed in my old cowboy costume, entertaining kids for $50 per event while my wife orchestrated Armageddon in corporate boardrooms. I tried contacting Moldaver again, warning her that Vault-Tec was planning to accelerate their timeline. She told me the resistance was being systematically eliminated. Vault-Tec security had raided their meetings, arrested key members on fabricated terrorism charges, destroyed their research. They're too powerful, Moldaver admitted. We can't stop them through conventional resistance. Our only hope is preserving the cold fusion technology for after the bombs fall, keeping knowledge alive for whoever survives. The weeks passed in surreal horror. I watched news reports about peace talks progressing between America and China, anchors cheerfully predicting an end to the decade-long war. I saw Vault-Tec's stock price climbing as wealthy families purchased vault reservations. I listened to government officials praising corporate partnerships in civil defense. Everyone thought they were being saved. Nobody knew they were being prepared for slaughter. On October 23rd, 2077, I had Janie for my custody week. It was a beautiful California afternoon, warm sunshine and clear skies. A family in our apartment building was throwing a birthday party for their son, and Janie had been invited. I stood in their backyard watching children play, thinking about how many of them would be dead within hours if Barb's plan succeeded. Then, the sirens started. Air raid warnings screaming across Los Angeles. Parents grabbed their children. People ran for their cars or basements. I looked at Janie's terrified face and knew I had seconds to decide. I picked her up and started running toward the street, searching desperately for shelter, for anything that might protect her from what was coming. The sky turned white. I'd seen nuclear detonations in military footage from the war, but nothing prepared me for the reality. A miniature sun bloomed over downtown Los Angeles, brighter than anything natural, bright enough to burn shadows into concrete. The shockwave hadn't reached us yet. I had maybe 30 seconds. I used the trick I'd taught Janie, held up my thumb against the mushroom cloud growing on the horizon. The cloud was much, much bigger than my thumb. According to Marine training, that meant we were inside the lethal radius. We wouldn't survive by running. If this story has kept you listening this far and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that like button. It really motivates me to create similar Fallout lores. I don't remember the actual impact. My memory cuts from holding Janie against my chest, trying to shield her with my body, to waking up in darkness surrounded by fire. The shockwave had thrown us into a partially collapsed building. I could hear Janie crying somewhere nearby, calling for me through the smoke and dust. I crawled toward her voice, my skin already blistering from radiation exposure, and found her trapped under debris. I pulled concrete and rebar off her small body, working with strength born from pure terror. She was alive, bleeding from a head wound, but conscious and breathing. I lifted her in my arms and stumbled out into what used to be Los Angeles. The city was gone. Everything I'd known, every landmark, every street, every building, all of it had been transformed into a burning hellscape of rubble and melted infrastructure. The sky was black with ash. The air tasted like metal and death. Other survivors emerged from wreckage. Around us, their faces already showing signs of radiation sickness. Some were screaming. Some wandered in shocked silence. A woman ran past us, her hair on fire, not even aware she was burning alive. I tried to help her, but she just kept running until she collapsed 50 feet away and stopped moving. I needed to get Janie underground, somewhere the radiation couldn't reach her. I thought about Vault-Tec's facilities, the shelters my wife had helped design. There was one nearby, Vault something, I couldn't remember the number. But when we reached the location, we found the vault door sealed shut. People were pounding on it, begging to be let inside, but nobody answered. The cry wolf effect Vault-Tec had engineered worked perfectly. They'd run so many false alarm drills that most people ignored the real warning until too late. I held Janie close and kept moving, searching for any shelter, any protection from the fallout beginning to drift down like poisonous snow. We found a basement that was still partially intact, huddled there with maybe 20 other survivors. Someone had a radio, and we listened to emergency broadcasts describing simultaneous nuclear strikes across the entire planet. China, Russia, America, Europe, everywhere. The Great War had finally come, exactly as Vault-Tec had wanted. I don't know how long we stayed in that basement. Days blurred together. People started getting sick from radiation poisoning, vomiting blood, their skin peeling off in sheets. Janie developed a fever. I gave her all our water, went scavenging through irradiated ruins trying to find medicine or food. The world above was transforming. Plants were already dying, turning brown and twisted. Animals wandered the streets in confused groups, their behavior strange and erratic. The lucky ones died quickly. The rest mutated. My own skin started changing within the first week. It became rough and leathery, resistant to further radiation damage but horrifically disfigured. My hair fell out in clumps, my voice became raspy and harsh. I was becoming what the survivors would later call a ghoul, a radiation-scarred post-human condemned to watch the world rot while my body refused to die. But Janie was getting worse. The radiation was killing her slowly, and I couldn't stop it. I made a desperate decision. I took Janie to the nearest Vault-Tec facility I could find, the one that had refused us entry during the initial attack. The door was open now, either because the occupants had left or because the security systems had failed. I carried my dying daughter down into those underground halls, searching for medical supplies, for anyone who might help her. The vault was empty, completely abandoned. Whatever experiment Vault-Tec had planned for this facility, it had already concluded or been interrupted by the bombs. I found a medical bay with functional equipment, used what little knowledge I had to try stabilizing Janie. She was barely conscious, her small body, fighting a battle it couldn't win. I held her hand and told her stories, the same bedtime tales her mother used to tell before Barb decided corporate profits mattered more than humanity. That's when they found us. A group of people in hazmat suits, carrying weapons and scanning equipment. They said they were from Vault-Tec recovery teams, assessing damage and securing facilities. They told me Janie needed immediate treatment in a proper medical vault, that they could save her if I let them take her. I was desperate, terrified, willing to believe anything that might keep my daughter alive. I let them take her. They promised to bring her back once she recovered. They gave me coordinates for a refugee center where I should wait. They said Vault-Tec was organizing survival camps for surface dwellers, that the corporation was fulfilling its humanitarian mission despite the catastrophe. I wanted so badly to believe them. I never saw Janie again. I waited at those coordinates for weeks. No refugee center existed. It was just an empty parking lot gradually being consumed by radioactive storms. I searched every vault I could find, broke into Vault-Tec facilities across California, interrogated every company representative I encountered. Nobody knew anything about my daughter. Nobody had records of Vault medical transports on October 23rd. The people in hazmat suits had simply taken her and vanished. I realized eventually what had happened. Vault-Tec had collected Janie as a test subject. A young child with radiation exposure but still alive was valuable data for their experiments. They'd needed populations for their 105 experimental vaults, and the bombs had provided perfect cover to acquire subjects nobody would search for. My daughter had become specimen number something, locked in some underground laboratory while scientists measured how childhood radiation exposure affected long-term development. Or maybe she died in their custody and they simply disposed of her body. Maybe the medical treatment was genuine but failed. Maybe she's still alive somewhere, frozen in a cryopod like Barb, waiting to be awakened in some distant future. I don't know. That's the worst part. Not knowing. Just endless decades of searching and finding nothing. As for Barb, I have a pretty good idea where she ended up. Vault 31, exactly as planned. Frozen in cryogenic sleep with the rest of Vault-Tec's executive leadership, waiting for the surface to become habitable again so they can emerge and claim ownership of whatever civilization rebuilt itself. She's probably still down there right now, preserved like an insect in amber, her last thoughts before freezing probably quarterly projections and market share analysis. I've spent 200 years as a ghoul wandering the wasteland Barb helped create. I've watched societies rise and fall. I've seen the Brotherhood of Steel form from West-Tech's abandoned military facility, exactly as the corporations predicted. I've watched super mutants roam the wasteland, von Felden's failed experiment escaping containment. I've seen the new California Republic grow from vault populations, developing democratic systems in controlled conditions. Every faction, every settlement, every ideology in this wasteland exists because those executives designed it that way. The vaults opened on schedule, releasing their experimental populations into the wastes. Some experiments succeeded. Vault 13's isolation study produced populations with low aggression and high cooperation. Vault 15's diverse demographic study created adaptable communities. Vault 8 became a functional city-state, but most experiments failed catastrophically. Vault 12's radiation leak killed everyone inside within 20 years. Vault 11's sacrificial overseer system drove the population to mass suicide. Vault 27's overcrowding experiment ended in cannibalism within 6 months. Vault-Tec didn't care about the failures. They were data points, information about what doesn't work in controlled societies. The frozen executives in Vault 31 monitored results remotely, adjusting parameters for future iterations. Bud Askins's plan worked perfectly. His Buds program ensured Vault-Tec leadership survived through time, awakening periodically to govern breeding populations in connected vaults, creating generations of supermanagers specifically engineered to accept corporate authority. I discovered all this gradually, piecing together evidence from abandoned facilities and terminal entries. Vault-Tec's master plan wasn't destroyed by the bombs, it was activated by them. Every horror in the wasteland, every mutant, every raider gang, every failed community, it all feeds into their long-term experiment. They're measuring which governance model works best in post-apocalyptic conditions, which social structures prove most resilient, which ideologies produce the most productive populations. And it's working. The wasteland is slowly organizing itself according to their parameters. The Brotherhood controls technology, maintaining corporate monopolies on advanced equipment. The NCR expands through democratic capitalism, recreating pre-war economic systems. The Institute pursues scientific advancement without ethical constraints, exactly what Big Ments wanted. Even Caesar's Legion, that brutal slaver army, represents an experimental data point about authoritarian control and cultural integration. Every choice survivors make, every settlement they build, every government they form, it's all being observed and measured by Vault-Tec's systems. The frozen executives will eventually awaken to a wasteland fully mapped and understood, with clear data about which corporate vision deserves to inherit what remains of civilization. They'll emerge from their vaults 200 years from now, claiming legitimate authority over populations their experiments created. I've tried to stop it. I've destroyed Vault-Tec facilities, killed their representatives, sabotaged their experiments when I found them. But I'm one ghoul against a corporation that planned for centuries. Every facility I destroy has backup systems. Every representative I kill has been replaced by frozen executives awakening on schedule. The machine keeps running because they built redundancy into every system. The worst part is that most wastelanders don't even know the truth. They think the vaults were meant to save people. They believe Vault-Tec was a heroic corporation overwhelmed by circumstances beyond their control. The company's propaganda survived the apocalypse better than actual history. People revere Vault Boy, that cheerful cartoon based on my face, as a symbol of pre-war optimism. They don't know he represents corporate genocide wearing a friendly smile. Some people have figured it out. Moldaver survived somehow, lived 200 years pursuing her cold fusion research, trying to create the clean energy that could have prevented the war. She knows what Vault-Tec did. She's been fighting them from the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, leading resistance movements across centuries. But she's fighting ghosts, frozen executives who can outlast any opposition simply by sleeping through it. I tracked down Robert House in New Vegas, found him exactly where he planned to be, preserved in his Lucky 38 casino running the strip like his personal kingdom. He admitted he was at that meeting, confirmed everything I heard, but he claims he didn't know Vault-Tec would actually drop the bombs. He says he predicted the war would happen on October 23rd based on intelligence patterns, that he was 20 hours short of completing his defenses because China struck first, not because of corporate conspiracy. I don't believe him. House was in that room when they planned it. He divided vaults among the corporations. He contributed his Securitron technology to Vault-Tec's security systems. Whether he personally pushed the button or just enabled those who did, he's complicit in billions of deaths. But he's untouchable now, protected by an army of robots in his fortified casino, controlling New Vegas like the corporate overlord he always wanted to be. I've searched for Janie in every vault between California and Nevada. I've interrogated Vault-Tec representatives, tortured information from corporate agents, broken into every sealed facility I could find. Nothing. No records, no traces, no evidence she even existed. It's like Vault-Tec erased her from history, made her just another nameless casualty of the Great War instead of a specific victim of their experimentation. Sometimes I wonder if I'm wrong, if maybe Barb didn't actually drop the bombs, if maybe China really did strike first and Vault-Tec just got lucky, their conspiracy interrupted by actual geopolitics before they could implement it. The evidence is ambiguous enough to allow doubt. The TV show makers even admitted they left it open-ended, that more story exists between that meeting and the actual bombs falling. But I heard my wife's voice through that listening device. I heard her propose genocide without hesitation. I heard those executives toast their agreement. Even if they didn't physically press the launch button, they created the conditions that made nuclear war inevitable. They suppressed clean energy, prolonged resource conflicts, manipulated international tensions, built a business model that required apocalypse for profitability. Whether they launched the first missile or China did becomes almost irrelevant when they'd engineered a scenario where someone would definitely launch it. The truth is, I'll probably never know for certain who dropped the first bomb. Vault-Tec destroyed most records during the war. Government archives were incinerated. Corporate databases were wiped or corrupted. The only evidence that survives is fragments, terminal entries, recorded messages, the scattered pieces of a conspiracy too large to fully comprehend. But I know enough. I know Vault-Tec wanted the war. I know they planned for it. I know they built their entire corporate strategy around guaranteeing civilization's destruction. And I know my wife was one of the architects of that strategy. Barb Howard, the woman I loved, the mother of my child, sat in a boardroom and calculated how many people needed to die for optimal shareholder value. She assigned experimental parameters to human populations. She scheduled the apocalypse like a product launch. She abandoned her own daughter to pursue corporate immortality. That knowledge has sustained me through 200 years of wandering this wasteland. Pure hatred kept me alive when radiation should have killed me. The need for answers, for revenge, for some accounting of what was done. That's what transformed me from Cooper Howard into the ghoul. I shed my humanity along with my unmarred skin, became something harder and crueler, something capable of surviving in the world Vault-Tec created. I've done terrible things. I've killed people who probably didn't deserve it. I've sold vault dwellers into slavery. I've harvested organs from living victims to pay for the drugs that keep me functional. Every moral compromise, every atrocity, I justified as necessary for survival in a world designed to reward cruelty. I became exactly what Vault-Tec wanted, a perfectly adapted wasteland predator shaped by their experimental conditions. But I never stopped searching for Barb and Janie. Every job I took, every place I traveled, I was looking for traces of Vault-Tec's executive program. I learned about Vault 31 eventually, discovered Bud Askin's Bud's Buds breeding program, creating generations of super managers. I found vaults where frozen executives were awakening on schedule to govern populations engineered to accept their authority. The conspiracy was real. The plan was working. Vault-Tec was succeeding. Recently, I finally got a lead, a vault overseer named Hank McLean running connected vaults 31 through 33 in Southern California. He's one of Bud's Buds, a junior executive frozen in 2077 and awakened in 2267 to serve as overseer. He was there at Vault-Tec headquarters before the war, probably worked directly under Barb. If anyone knows where the senior executives are frozen, where my wife is sleeping, it's him. I tracked him to Griffith Observatory, where he was holding a woman named Moldaver hostage. Yes, the same Moldaver who warned me about Vault-Tec 200 years ago, still alive and still fighting corporate control. She'd achieved cold fusion finally, created unlimited clean energy that could have saved the world if Vault-Tec hadn't buried it. Hank wanted that technology destroyed because it threatened his corporate master's control over resources. I confronted him there, put a gun to his head, demanded to know where my family was. He looked at me with these dead corporate eyes and said nothing, just stared like I was a technical problem he needed to solve. So I shot him, not fatally, just enough to cripple him, to make him understand I was serious. Then I let him crawl away because I knew he'd run straight to his superiors, straight to wherever Vault-Tec's leadership was hiding. He headed northeast toward New Vegas. That confirmed what I suspected. The senior executives aren't frozen in California. They're somewhere in Nevada, probably in a facility connected to Robert House's operations. House was at that meeting. He knows where Barb is. He's probably been protecting Vault-Tec's executive vault for 2 centuries, maintaining their cryogenic systems, ensuring the conspiracy survives into whatever future they're planning. So that's where I'm going now. Following Hank to New Vegas, tracking him to whatever executive vault holds my wife. I'm bringing someone with me, a vault dweller named Lucy McLean, who happens to be Hank's daughter. She doesn't know it yet, but she's evidence of the breeding program, one of the super managers engineered to govern Vault-Tec's future civilization. Her existence proves the conspiracy's depth. Even families are corporate products now, genetically selected and behaviorally conditioned across generations. Lucy still believes in humanity's goodness. She thinks the wasteland can be redeemed through kindness and cooperation. She doesn't understand yet that every impulse, every moral principle, every value she holds has been engineered into her by corporate social experiments designed to produce compliant populations. But she will understand. The wasteland teaches everyone eventually. It taught me. It'll teach her. When I find Barb's cryopod, I don't know what I'll do. Part of me wants to smash it, let her suffocate in frozen sleep, deny her the future she murdered billions to achieve. Part of me wants to wake her up, force her to see what her perfect corporate world actually looks like, make her walk through the wasteland she created, and confront every corpse, every mutant, every destroyed community. Part of me still loves her, still remembers the woman she was before ambition rotted her soul, and wants to believe she had doubts, that she regretted what she'd done. But I know the truth. Barb Howard didn't have doubts. She planned meticulously, executed perfectly, succeeded completely. She's probably dreaming corporate dreams in her cryopod, her last thoughts before freezing some calculation about market share in the post-apocalyptic economy. When she wakes, she'll check quarterly reports, assess experimental results, adjust parameters for the next phase of Vault-Tec's master plan. She won't feel remorse. She'll feel satisfaction that her sacrifice of billions produced the data she needed. That's what I can't forgive. Not the murder itself, but the cold calculation behind it. She didn't drop bombs in anger or fear or desperate necessity. She dropped them for quarterly earnings. She traded civilization for shareholder value. She killed our daughter for a line item on a balance sheet. That kind of evil is harder to comprehend than simple cruelty. At least cruelty acknowledges its victims as human. Barb's corporate sociopathy reduced billions to data points, experimental subjects, acceptable losses in pursuit of optimal outcomes. Every vault dweller I meet is evidence of her crime. Every super mutant shambling through the wasteland, every feral ghoul driven mad by radiation, every raider gang fighting over scraps, every child born into this poisoned world, they're all consequences of decisions made in that boardroom, calculations performed by executives who valued profit over human life. Vault-Tec didn't just destroy civilization, they designed its replacement, engineered a wasteland that would produce exactly the experimental data they wanted. And it worked. That's the most horrifying realization. Their plan succeeded. The wasteland is organizing itself according to corporate parameters. Societies are forming, governments are emerging, ideologies are competing, all within experimental frameworks Vault-Tec designed. In another century, when surface radiation drops to acceptable levels, the frozen executives will awaken to a world fully mapped and understood. ready to be claimed by whichever corporation developed the best governance model. They'll emerge from their vaults as the legitimate inheritors of post-apocalyptic civilization, the only groups with complete historical records and technical knowledge. Wastelanders will revere them as saviors, pre-war survivors bringing lost wisdom to rebuild society. Nobody will remember that these same executives orchestrated the apocalypse. History will be rewritten, just like Vault-Tec planned. The villains will become heroes. The murderers will become visionaries. Corporate genocide will become necessary. Sacrifice. Unless I stop them, unless I find those executive vaults and destroy them before the frozen executives awaken, unless I expose the truth so completely that even Vault-Tec's propaganda can't suppress it, unless I make sure the wasteland knows exactly who created this hell and why. That's my mission now. Not revenge, though I won't pretend that's not part of it. Not justice, because justice is impossible for crimes this large. Just truth. Making sure the wasteland knows what Vault-Tec did, what Barb did, what every executive in that meeting contributed to. Ensuring their names are remembered not as saviors but as mass murderers who traded billions of lives for corporate control. I'm the last witness to that meeting. The last person alive who heard them plan it, who knows exactly what they discussed and why. When I die, that knowledge dies with me, so I'm preserving it however I can, recording messages, leaving terminal entries in abandoned facilities, telling my story to anyone who'll listen, even knowing most people think I'm just another crazy ghoul ranting about pre-war conspiracies. But some people believe me. Moldaver believed me. Lucy is starting to believe me. Others will follow. The truth has a way of surviving even when corporations try to bury it. Vault-Tec can destroy records, manipulate history, control narratives for centuries, but they can't destroy memory. They can't erase the testimony of someone who was there, who heard them, who knows exactly what they are. So I keep walking through this wasteland, searching for my wife's cryopod, following Hank McLean to New Vegas, hoping I'll find answers or at least revenge. Every step takes me deeper into Vault-Tec's conspiracy, closer to understanding the full scope of their plan. Every terminal I access reveals more pieces. Every vault I explore shows another experimental parameter. The picture keeps getting bigger and worse. If this confession meant something to you, leave a like. It's the only way I know you liked the video. I don't know how my story ends. Maybe I find Barb and get the confrontation I've been seeking for 2 centuries. Maybe I destroy Vault-Tec's executive program and save the wasteland from corporate resurrection. Maybe I fail completely and the frozen executives awaken exactly as planned, claiming ownership of humanity's future. But at least I'll die knowing I tried. At least I'll die knowing someone fought back against Vault-Tec's conspiracy. Someone refused to accept their engineered wasteland as inevitable. At least I'll die knowing the truth survived, that somewhere in this poisoned world, people know what really happened on October 23rd, 2077. The Great War wasn't started by China. It wasn't started by America. It was started by corporations who saw apocalypse as a business opportunity, who valued monopoly over human survival, who traded civilization for control. Vault-Tec, Robco, West-Tec, Big Mint, Repcon, they all conspired together to end the world and rebuild it according to their specifications. And my wife, Barb Howard, was one of the architects of that conspiracy. The woman I loved, the mother of my child, the friendly face of corporate genocide. She's still out there somewhere, frozen in time, waiting to claim her reward for orchestrating billions of deaths. I'm going to find her, and when I do, the wasteland will finally know the truth about who really started the Great War. War. War never changes. Barb taught me that in a conference room 200 years ago, and I've been living that lesson ever since. The corporations that started this war are still fighting it, still pursuing their experiments, still trying to control humanity's future. Only difference is now they're doing it from cryopods instead of boardrooms. But I'm still here, still fighting, still searching for answers in a world designed to destroy hope. That's what ghouls do. We survive. We remember. We refuse to let the truth die just because civilization did. See you in the wasteland.